And a final speaker is Simon Turner, who's the campaign manager for Driving for Better Business.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully the talks that you've heard today will have impressed on you just how important good management for work-related road safety is. I think all the agencies and organisations who've shared the stage this afternoon view this as vital to our attempts to reduce both incidents and casualties on the roads, many of which involve people who are driving for work. And of course it's essential to us to help us with our obligations as employers. Now, we've heard about the legal requirements with regards to workplace health and safety, and obviously the chances that our drivers can now get caught up in some of these multi-agency compliance events if they're driving non-compliantly or the vehicles aren't maintained well enough. We've heard about the moral case and how as employers all of us should be working to ensure that all of our staff go home safe and well at the end of each day. And then of course we've heard about the financial benefits that come from managing it well. So from Kent Fire and Rescue Service, a public sector organisation, and with AMI, a private sector company, but supplying into the public sector, both of those have made hugely significant savings, operational cost reductions, improvements in environmental impact, and alleviating budgetary pressure. But interestingly, both of them said that wasn't the key driver. It was the moral imperative about reducing the risks to their staff. Now, it's important, obviously, that the private and the public sector work together on this. And Jesse Norman, who Alison just mentioned, is a very keen supporter of Driving for Better Business. He said road safety is not just a matter for government and the public sector, although we are traditionally the people who promote road safety, both in our own sector and the private sector. It requires support from the private sector, and that means businesses making sure they are compliant with current legislation. Now, many of you will have colleagues who work as part of Safer Roads partnerships or have your own business outreach programs. They're talking to businesses about what needs to happen. So it really is incumbent upon all of us to make sure we live up to those same standards. So Highways England, through the Driving for Better Business programme, have developed a very simple system, a framework, as both Sean and James alluded to earlier, which is a 7-step process with free resources at each step of the way for us to help engage private sector businesses and fill any gaps that we have ourselves. It starts very simply, engaging with Driving for Better Business, registering your email address on the website so that you can get the newsletter, you can get access to the full range of resources that we have on offer, and you also get alerted to future events. So we're going to be running in the next few months a series of regional events to follow on from this. So any colleagues you may have who you would like to hear what we've said today, we'll be running a series of events to allow that to happen. Steps 2 to 5 are very simple, basic legal requirement steps in line with what the HSE recommends through its Driving for Work guidance. And that basically covers leadership from the top. Now, our Chief Executive, Jim O'Sullivan, gave a very, very good talk around leadership from Highways England's point of view, and how it's so important to him that his objective of improving work-related road safety is seen and understood by everyone throughout the organisation. We have to do a risk assessment. Again, he said he'd done his own risk assessment, but all businesses legally have to do a risk assessment of their Driving for Work activities. Policies, we need to explain the rules to our drivers, so driving at work policies. And finally, measuring and monitoring your fleet activity. If you don't know how many drivers or vehicles you've got, how many times they're crashing, what the cost is, how many miles they're doing, you're not managing that properly. So it's essential that all businesses and public sector organisations measure and monitor their fleet activity. So all of those are free to achieve. They just require some human resource internally to make that happen. And once you've done that, step 6 is the commitment. Highways England have done that. It's simply a declaration that you run your organisation in line with the HSE their driving at work guidance and with health and safety law. Number 7 is good practice. Getting to that level is basically the minimum legal requirement. When we've heard from Sean and James, they have gone well beyond that. They're looking at improving driver behaviour, improving the culture, installing telematics and using that data intelligently. That's where the real benefits come from. So that 7-step ladder is something that at Highways England we've already gone through. That's our Chief Highways Engineer, Mike Wilson, proudly holding his Driving for Better Business commitment certificate. We went through this process last year. All areas of the business were risk assessed. We produced a new driving at work policy in the summer. Already we've introduced a further iteration of that because it's been updated as the circumstances of the business have changed. And we've produced all of these free resources for you and private businesses as well to use as they complete that DFBB journey. So as far as next steps that we'd like you to take, we'd like you to look at running your own multi-agency events in your local regions. As Paul's just outlined some of the things that they've done, some of the success rates of those has been staggering. They've typically found 80 to 85%, sometimes even above, incidents of non-compliance on those events. It's a very cost-effective use of your resources to put those events on. And then lastly, we'd like you to push this through your supply chains as well. Now, Alison mentioned this about how easy that should be to put that through your supply chains and what a good objective it should be. She mentioned the Slavery Act as well. There are lots of other pieces of legislation that your supply chains have to comply with before they have any chance of getting a public sector procurement order from them, which can be very lucrative to them. They should be putting the right effort into making sure they're running their business properly. You wouldn't employ a supplier, as we said, use child or slave labour, or treated women as second-class citizens, or discriminated against any minorities. You wouldn't deal with them if they were found to be bribing people to win work or engaging in tax avoidance. And why? Because all of those are illegal. And many businesses and many public sector organisations now require you, as a supplier, to furnish the client with a copy of your policy. I know many construction companies who will not let you on their supplier list unless you provide a copy of your anti-slavery policy. Alison mentioned that one as well. So why on earth would you give public money to a supplier who was potentially operating their fleet in a way that could endanger the local public, either through drivers who are behaving non-compliantly or unsafe vehicles? They're endangering your local constituency. So that's what we'd ask you to do, is to get started on that. With the bags that you've got on your chairs, there is a couple of resources in there. There's a public sector guide which explains exactly what Driving for Better Business is and how you can get more involved. The 7-step ladder of compliance I explained is outlined in a lot more detail in there, and it's got links to all the resources that we provide for free in order to help you get on that ladder and take the next steps. Everything about Driving for Better Business is free. It's been funded by Highways England. All the resources are created. There's no cost to join, and there's no cost to access any of these resources. The other one that you might find of interest, as James mentioned earlier, a grey fleet guide in there. James's focus next year is on the risk of running a grey fleet, and most of the public sector have very big grey fleets where employees are using their own cars. That guide will outline many of the challenges you might face, and I'm sure a lot of you will understand many of those challenges already, but it also shows you some of the solutions that many organisations in the public sector are implementing at the moment to save big 6-figure sums out of their budgets, for instance through reduced mileage claims.